If I look back on our times as a family, some of our favorite times together was around the dinner table. Now, I don't know about your house, but when I was growing up, we were involved in sports and church and those activities. So sometimes the dinner table was actually the hood of the truck, and it was a hot dog, a bag of popcorn, and a Chico stick from the Little League. Other times it was mom had cooked on Sunday, and we would gather around our table and we would talk about the day, we'd talk about the week, we would laugh, we would share. And one of the things that's happened in our life with our children, before our daughter, got married, ripped her heart out and moved. And but before all that happened, we had great times around our dinner table. We would sit, and it seemed like that was the times when there was no preoccupation with life. And we would sit and we would just share. And we would find out more what was going on. And if they had friends over, then we would hear what was going on with them as well. And with the laughter and what would end up as maybe just 30, 40 minutes around the dinner table would sometimes go to 2 and 3 hours. And we would sit and laugh and share. Well, today is kind of one of those times when we're going to come around the table as a family and we're going to have a talk. And we're going to share about what's happening, where we've been, where we're going, and things that we're doing. Now, I don't know if you've ever been that lucky soul that got to go invited to a dinner party and a family meeting of not your family breaks out. And you're awkward. And you're like, why am I here? My wife just drugged me here, and I can't hide. I can't leave, and I got to endure. So if you're a guest with us today, we're going to ask you, give us a little bit of grace. We think there's some good things and some things we want to share, but we also want to spend some time talking and sharing. The next few weeks, we're going to be talking about this series, this LED, where we're talking about what does it mean? What does it look like for VNC? And so today, the questions that we've been wrestling with as a staff, and we've been working on this for several months, where we've just opening up Scripture and looking at things, praying, searching God's heart and will. I mean, there's just things that just pop up in our minds that we struggle with. And maybe you've had the same struggles. Maybe you've had the same thoughts. What is the role of the local church? What are we really here to do? If you do a little research, and you can find that people say the church has some pretty specific roles: of corporate worship, discipleship, community, that we're to serve, we're to be involved in missions. Those are some general thoughts. But have you ever wondered what is VNC's role in our local community? What are we called to do? Maybe there's something that God's been whispering into our very soul. Things that He's been calling us to do, things that He's been calling us to reach for. Maybe if we even shake it down just a little further, what are you and I as individual believers, followers of Christ? When we sing that song about your kingdom, that we got to ask that tough question: what am I supposed to do in your kingdom? What am I being called? What is God laid specifically that my role is in the kingdom? Frankly, there's a lot of churches in Valparaiso, right? There's a lot. And if you go to Porter County, there's more. But there's a lot of churches. There's some good churches. There are good leaders. There are good believers. There are good people in most of these churches. Good folks. And so there comes a point that if we were just going to open the doors and tell all the bad people to come in and we'll make you good, I'm not sure that works. If they did, wouldn't all these really good churches with really good people and really good leaders, wouldn't they be jam-packed? Wouldn't they be overflowing? So when we start thinking about this, we've got to be honest and go back. And so when we started diving in, we felt like before we could decide where we needed to go and what we needed to do, we had to also be retrospective and look back and say, okay, where are we at now? What got us here? What got us to this point? And so in every organization, every church, every business, if you're a small business owner or you're leading a small business, that you fall into this category. That in every organization, you start with a mission. And the mission is what drives everything. It's every organization, it begins with this. And this is what gets people excited. It's what gets people organized. And when you're in mission, when you're thriving in this mission, then it calls you to do something more. For VNC, we stated our mission statement is helping people become fully devoted followers of Jesus Christ. Now, your mission statement typically is broad. You don't want to say, we want to help people between the ages of 19 to 24, because there comes a point where we're all past 19 to 24, and then you say, well, we won, let's go home. So your mission statement's got to have some broad to it so we can make sure it happens. Well, for VNC, that mission started in 1924 in a tent sitting on bales of hay. And they decided there's 13 individuals that got together and said, I believe we can have a church that would be special in our community. We believe there can be something different that is being offered now. And these 13 individuals got together. They started with a revival. They brought an evangelist in to share and to speak. And they sat on the bales of hay. And at night, they pulled up their cars. There were no lanterns or lights for them, so they used the headlamps from their vehicles to help them to be able to see. And they gathered, and they had this dream of what a new church would look like in Valparaiso. They had a dream of what could happen next. They had a dream about a movement that would take place in their community. And so when you have this mission, it leads you to the next movement. It leads you because people get excited, and mission creates excitement. People get together. We begin involving ourselves. We begin sacrificing. A movement of many on a mission, it creates revolution. And all of a sudden, there's a spark. And the 13, as they sat around these bales of hay, they started saying about things they could do. Words, when you're in movement phase of your organization, you hear words like this: sacrifice. We're going to go out on a limb. We're going to take some risk. It's new. It's fresh. Because movement gets people going. Everybody wants to be involved in movement. If you play the stock market, you want to find the new, young, up-and-coming company to invest in so your rewards are greater. If you know now buying Google and Apple is really expensive, so you step back and you think, well, we got to wait and see what happens. But those young incomers, you think that's where my bang for my buck's going to come. And movement drives organizations, it drives mission out of the status quo. Because when you and I are in movement, we're saying, I'm not settling for what we used to do. I'm not settling just because we used to do it that way. And so what inevitably happens as these companies and organizations and churches, they move from mission to movement, then they head right into machinery. And a machine's not necessarily bad, because when you get excited, and the 13 sitting in the bales of hay and under a tent eventually said, we got to have a building. We got to have something. We can't just keep, it gets cold here. We're not going to be able to just stand outside. We're not in Florida. We got to do something here. So you got to start thinking of things. And then once you go inside, we probably got to have a nursery. We got to have somewhere for people to put these kids. They're screaming all through the service. So now we got to start putting things together. We start thinking more strategically. If we're going to have a nursery, we probably got to set up a rotation because Millie's not going to go back there every Sunday. Millie wants to hear the singing and wants to hear the word being preached. Well, if Millie goes today, you think she can meet somebody at the front door and greet them? Because now it's not just, hey, we're on bales of hay, there's 13 of us. Now there's 30 of us, and we probably ought to say hi to people out in the parking lot. You know what we ought to do? We ought to form some rotations, some schedules. And so this loose organization of people that were taking high risk, high reward, now have created some standards of operation, the way we're going to do things. We have to have some policies. Because when you're in a tent and somebody shows up and they brought their cow with them, nobody cares. But somebody brings a cow in this building, Julie will find you. Right? So now we got standards of operation. And our movement slowly goes into machine mode. And machines are just this way we operate, the way we function. And slowly, every machine that I've ever witnessed breaks down. Every machine needs maintenance. Every machine has issues at some point. Somebody doesn't show up, and that means the person that got the week off now has to go back in and cover for the person that decided to go to their kid's volleyball game. Now all of a sudden the machinery is taking all the time because of maintenance that is required. And slowly what happens in organizations and businesses and in churches is the maintenance of what has to happen just to be here takes precedent over the mission that actually drives you. The very thing when 13 people got together for under a tent now slowly becomes something we just got to do. Something we just have to keep working through. It's my time to be with the children. It's my turn to drive the van. It's my turn to take the offering. It's my turn to go do these things. And maintenance is not necessarily bad. It's a necessity. However, it really can bog down mission. It can slow down why you got together in the very first place. What was really driving you? And then ultimately what happens next with mission, if it's not checked, is it almost becomes more of a museum type setting. And you can move right into monument phase. And monuments were made to be revered. Monuments were made for us to go and step back and look. There's usually ropes keeping us from touching it. There's usually boundaries keeping us from holding it or embracing it. Monuments are for us to step back and talk about how good it used to be. Monuments were designed for us to pay an admission and show up and go, wow, that's spectacular. And ultimately, with monuments, people begin to expect a certain amount of services from the caretakers of the monument. No longer do I want to go and help in the nursery. Now when I show up, I just assume somebody will be there to take care of my child in the nursery. And we begin to expect things, and we almost begin to demand them. Because mission is no longer what's driving us. Now we're revering the monument. If you've ever had a chance to go online and view some of the cathedrals that are in Europe, or if you've ever been able to walk in some of these massive 500, 600, 700, 800-year-old cathedrals that are absolutely breathtaking. They're astonishing at their size. They're astonishing at what they look like and what they used to do. But Mass is a thing that just happens now. You pay your euro, you get a candle, and you come in. No longer is it impacting culture or community. No longer is the mission why people sacrificed and gave of themselves to build this unbelievable gift back to God. Now it's just something we come in. There's a lot of ropes keeping you from touching the artwork. There's a lot of boundaries and tape on the floor to say, don't cross here. Now it's just something you come in and get to be a part of. Pay your euro and leave. When you hit monument phase, the best days were the old days. The best days were the days when we look back and we talked about the 13. The best days were in our rearview mirror. So there's a couple of options that happen. So when you hit that monument phase, every organization, every church, every business, they got to hit this moment where they say, okay, we had this unbelievable mission that we still believe in, this mission that was talking about people and was driving us. It energized us. It accelerated growth. We were winning people. We were touching lives. We were taking risks. We were going out on limbs. We were doing things that everybody else said wasn't possible. Every church in town that was a monument was looking back going, look at those guys. They're sitting on bells of hay. They don't even have lights. They don't have a building. They don't have a room. So all those monuments, they look back. But see, what happens is when you hit that, you got two options. The first one is you say, you know what? We had a great run. Number one, your first option is you go, I had a great run. I say we ride this thing out, and if we die, we die. If it just doesn't work, we had a great run. And the churches that they talked about in Revelation, they're not here anymore either. So, let's just start a new one. We'll move down here. We'll find some land. We'll make it happen. We'll stay the course, and we'll spend our remaining days as a monument. The second option is that you take your mission and you say, I'm going to modernize it. I want to start a rebirth, a re-energy, a re-excitement. And I want to do some things that maybe we didn't do before, or maybe take some old risk again. And so today, as we come together as a family around the table, we want to talk about, we're at this crossroads because everything that's happened in the last 92 years has got us to this point, and it's been good. It's been good. There have been mistakes that have been made. There have been victories that we won. There have been things that have happened, and man, it's been good. But so here we are, we're kind of at this crossroads, and it's time to modernize the mission. Our mission statement is strong. We still believe in helping people become fully devoted followers of Jesus Christ. That's good stuff. That's about expanding the kingdom. And we want to keep this mission and fine-tune this vision and strategy to achieve more. I believe if we look back and being here a little over 20 years and being able to see some things that have happened at VNC also gives us some insight to talking to people that have been around a whole lot longer. Now, sadly, a lot of our people that were around in those early days and those infancy stages of VNC, they've passed. But they've left behind some great legacy. And when we take and look at a timeline from 1924 to 2016, I believe we can come away with, in my opinion, there were 4 major decisions that happened that really shaped who we are, that really shaped where we are at right now and staged us for the future. The first one was 1924, obviously, when they got together, when those 13 people sacrificed of themselves to raise the money to bring in a leader to lead them. $624 they pulled together between the 13 people in 1924. That was a lot of money for 13 people in 1924 to get together. And they sat on bales of hay for several weeks, and they said, we can do this. We're going to do something different. We're going to do something that's not been done before. And they fought through all the challenges of it. If 1924 doesn't happen, we're probably meeting each other at other places. The second one was in the late 70s and early 80s. The church was downtown. It had gone through several building projects and adding from the basement they were borrowing to a floor plan. And if you've ever been down by Von Tobel's, there's a yellow brick church there. That's the old Church of the Nazarene that was there for several years. But in the late 70s and early 80s, some leaders in that church said, I believe we got to head north. We're landlocked. There's nothing more we can do. Our parking lot, we're borrowing parking spaces. We're walking blocks to get here. We've got to do something. And that decision was a hard decision, and it took its toll on the congregation. There was some hurt feelings. There was some times, and they ended up, and they bought this 13 acres out here and moved the church out in this direction. And now at that time, this was all cornfields and dirt roads, and the Hodder Farm was out here. And so there were people going, y'all have lost your mind. You are downtown on the city square, and you're going to start a church in a cornfield. This is not if you build it, they will come. Y'all have lost your mind. And there were people in that little church that said, hey, you're nuts. We're not going to fund that dream. And they left. Got hurt, got mad. Good people, board members, good people. And they bought this land, and they said, we believe the city's going to go north. They were right. They were right. It was gutsy, but they did it. It was a scary challenge, but they stepped up. I believe that was one of those crossroad decisions that had to be made. The third one was Pastor Tanner came in 1994, but in the late 90s, he started forming a team. There were some meetings we had where we sat down, and he said, I believe that we've got to change the way we're doing some things. And it was through his leadership and his vision of driving us to say, hey, we can't just be here and open our doors and expect people to come in because we're a church. Because folks just don't show up that way. They get invited, they get reached, they get asked, and we've got to keep this. We got to keep driving this boat. We got to do things. And so around 1999, we began making some hard decision changes that took place. We used to have these whiteboard meetings where we would get together, and the term we used, we'd write up on the whiteboard, Valpo Vinny. None of you here are named Vinny, I don't think, but we kept looking for him. And we started asking ourselves what it would be like to get Valpo Vinny. What do we have to do to reach Valpo Vinny? The demographics of Valparaiso and Porter County were beginning to change. We were being less dominated by steel mill workers and farmers, more commuters coming in from Chicago. And so we started saying, what do we need to do to be as relevant as possible? We're not going to water down our message one bit. We're not going to change the holiness call that we feel we have on our church. But what do we got to do to reach the lost and the missing? And we began making some changes, some subtle changes started happening. And this may shock some of you that have been here recently, but we used to wear coat and ties every Sunday. And those were good days if you like wearing nooses, and I don't. But we wore them. But we felt like our folks that were commuting in from Chicago every day were wearing these suit and ties, and they didn't want to come to church wearing suit and ties. So we did the unthinkable. We took the ties off. Now we just wore our coats. And then the coats went. And then we crossed over to holy ground and we went to blue jeans. Yeah. Now, there are some of you in here today wearing shorts. We're good with that. If you can withstand the cold, God bless you. But there was a time in the early 90s you'd wear shorts, you'd probably been stared at. Because you'd been it. You would have been there looking for a swim, but that'd been it. And so this is those times, there was those things, and we began changing the way we worship. We'd start changing the things, not because it was just trying to be mean or we were just trying to mix it up. We were trying to find Valpo Vinny. We were doing everything we could to find the lost and the missing. In an 18-month period from that time, those decisions, 1999 into 18 months forward, we lost about 160 people, good people. Leaders, teachers, folks that gave financially, that had been a part of a dream long before us. They just couldn't make that adjustment. And we understood. Some left well, some didn't. But at the end of 24 months, we were plus 300. We were finding ways, creative ways, to find the lost and the missing. And we look back on that time, and it would have been a challenge, and we persevered. The fourth big decision we felt like we faced was in 2006 when a group of leaders had been dreaming and talking and sharing, and they made the final decision that we were going to go forward and add the 45,000 square feet that you're worshiping in now. At that point in time in our church history, we had 4 services on a weekend. We were using well over 200 man-hours a week to flip the building. Everything we owned was on Rubbermaids and carts and storage. Some of us were using our cars to store church equipment. We were using sheds in our houses, and we would move things. We were mobile, agile, hostile, and ready to go. And these major decisions came at a point in time in our history where we had to do something because we were at a point. What had gotten us here was good. Where we had been from bales of hay to what we used to do in our old sanctuary to what we do in the last 8 years in this room have been good. They got us here. But as we look to the future and we look to the coming days, we can't stay here. We've got to go there. What does there look like? And I'd love to tell you that we have come up with this unbelievable creative statement that you're going to go, my goodness, why didn't we think of this sooner? What it is really, though, is it's a call to go back to our very core of who we are. It's a call that we believe has been mandated by God. And we look back over our history, there have been elements of this, and this is just putting it back into one package, easy to understand. And we believe that God has called us into LED. And it just talks about the fact that we're going to focus on 3 things primarily: leadership, evangelism, and discipleship. The symbol that is up on the behind me and with the arrows, and that's a schematic symbol for LED. And it's these 2 arrows shooting away from the icon or images of light being emitted. And LEDs are just tiny bulbs that fit easily into an electrical circuit. And unlike ordinary incandescent bulbs, they have thousands of hours longer life. They're able to do more. And leadership, evangelism, and discipleship is a calling for us to be light. For us to be the light. I want us to read this passage, Matthew chapter 5, verses 14 through 16. Let me read this as the words are up on the screen. It says, "You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." Now, Matthew chapters 5, 6, and 7 are called the Sermon on the Mount. And basically, that name is identified because of the area, the place that Jesus was teaching from. He'd gone up on a mountainside to teach so his voice would echo through the valleys so the people could hear him. And he's up on this hillside, and this message is profound because what it is, it's this basic opening line of this message that he's preaching to say, here's how you are to live if you are a follower of me. If you're going to follow me, this is what you're to do. And he goes and covers every current topic for the people today, of that day, and of now. In this small section of chapter 5, he calls us, the followers of Christ, to be the light. And light is used all through Scripture. Light is used in different places to identify holiness, to identify the presence of the Almighty God. In fact, in 1 John 1:5, Jesus said, "I am the light of the world." In John 8:12, he says, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." In John 1:9, he says, "The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into this world." In John 9:5, he says this, "While I am in the world, I am the light of the world." But here in Matthew 5, he's identified himself as light. He's identified himself that while I'm here for a little while, I'll be your light. But now in Matthew 5, he says, you are the light. It changes just subtly, but isn't that a great compliment? You are the light. Now, there's a lot of thoughts on what that means. But as I broke it down and kept looking at it and researching it, I believe that Jesus is saying that while I was on earth, I'm the light of the world. But as I leave this fleshly world and go to this heavenly realm, I leave behind my hands and feet. I leave you. And that message that echoes all the way from 2,000 years ago till today, that I leave you to be the light of the world. We don't create the light. We're not our own gods. None of that. We are emitting light like LED bulbs. We are emitting light that he has created because he leaves behind his followers. And he goes, it's up to you. I mean, when he told Peter, you're going to be the rock, and I'm going to build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail. And he goes, you are the light. He knew that he was leaving, and he knew that he was leaving the hands of the church and the hands of the 12. And he goes, you are now the hope of the world. The whole future of the church is in your hands. And he lets this light shine through us. Christ is that hope, but he sends us out as the hope and commission. And so light, what does light really do? It reveals. That passage in chapter 5 says that the city on the hill cannot hide. City on a hill cannot hide. It makes truth known even in the darkness. So when you and I are the light of the world, we are making sure people know the truth, even in the darkness, no matter where you're at. Light makes things visible. Light a lamp and put it on a stand so the whole house can see. It brings clarity into the darkness. And what does light do? It sends a sense of urgency. You let your light shine before others because, frankly, I'm not sure how good of a job we've done as a church. Not VNC, all church. I'm not sure we're winning the battle. I'm not sure we've sensed the urgency in a message to a lost and dying world. I'll be honest with you, I don't know that I totally get the end times. I know that it does end, and I know that I get to go to heaven. And that's really all I'm not breaking down the 7 lamps and telling you what all that means. Anybody that says they got it all figured out, I would run from. But I'm not sure that the church understands the urgency of a lost and dying world. We've moved cowardly into survival mode and just hope they don't call us out, instead of running into it and saying we have the light of the world, the hope. And so there's an urgency with light, that we're going to live in community with a lost and dying world. It mobilizes us. Light mobilizes us and people to glorify God in heaven, not us on earth. This isn't about us looking better. This isn't about us getting accolades. This isn't about us feeling better about us at night. This is about us mobilizing more light bearers into action. We believe we can do that in 3 ways. We believe to really foster what it means to be the light of the world through evangelism and through leadership and through discipleship. We're going to look, the next 3 weeks, we're going to break down more what does LED mean. But in Ephesians 4:11 and 12, it says, so Christ himself gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the pastors, and teachers to equip his people for works of service, so that the body of Christ may be built up. It's Ephesians 4:11 and 12. And the words there, that leadership is encouraging, it's equipping, it's empowering, and it's pushing people into service. At VNC, we're going to strive to do a much better job of equipping, encouraging, and empowering you, light bearers, for service. We want to throw into more evangelism. Eric had talked last week. Was that not powerful? That was one of my favorite services of the year, when we talked about what we had done in evangelism. And he talked about the Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria and all the ends of the earth. That evangelism for us in this future is becoming intentional and missional, while living out our tension between our creed and our deed. That we've got to be intentionally going out and finding the lost and the missing, building relationships in our community, not just survival mode, but doing something more. And that what we say we are and what we do actually align. Because if we say we're one thing and live another, we're not carrying the light very far. We want to continue in that area. And the discipleship, the D part. And discipleship is talking about Isaiah 40. I'm not going to read this passage to you, the 29 through 31. But at the end of it, basically, is that we want to take people in their discipleship journey into the next step. That those that are hopeful in the faith become walkers. Those that are walkers become runners. And those that are runners will become soarers. That they take that next step. That discipleship, the true growth, is both knowing and becoming. That we can't just add knowledge and we can't just start doing. That we have to take them in parallel together to grow. And there's tension in there. Because there are some that are more academic. They just want to gain more knowledge without ever living it out. And there are those that won't take the time to learn the academic side. They just want to keep going forward and doing what they feel is best and not necessarily what God is calling them to. And we're going to begin to develop that more. So we believe that if we took the 3 circles of leadership and evangelism, discipleship, and we laid them on top of each other like intrinsic circles, that you will see this is how they line up. And if you just do 2 of the 3, we just did leadership and discipleship, then really what we have become is a holy country club. That we're really good at making disciples, and we hang out together and we challenge each other, but we're not reaching anyone, we're not pulling anybody else in, then we're just a holy country club. We just gathered up. And if we just have leadership and evangelism, so we're always reaching out, but we're not digging our roots deeper and pulling people up to learn more about your word and your character, then we become a mile wide and an inch deep. And if we just do evangelism and discipleship without any leadership, then it's easy for us to become a stagnant church. Easy for us just to be our own little pod of people. So for us to have all 3 layered together, all 3 touching, then we become a fully devoted follower of Jesus Christ. You know, I had a meeting this week with a friend, and he shared this story with me, and so I looked it up, and I want to show you a picture of these trees. This picture can only be taken in Fish Lake National Park, Utah. The yellow leaf tree is a quaking aspen. Scientists have named it Pando. It means trembling giant, because of its size and the noise it makes when the wind is blowing. And besides this beauty, Pando has some very unique characteristics about it. It was discovered in the 1970s. There are 47,000 shoots or tree trunks. But these trees are genetically identical cloned of each other, because each of these trees come from the same root. They are linked together. After years of research in 1992, scientists got together and they said this is the world's most massive living organism on the planet. It's over 106 acres big. That's huge. It's estimated to weigh at about 6,600 tons. This massive footprint is what earns Pando's reputation as the largest living thing on the planet. But out of all the 47,000 trees that are connected, identically cloned together, they are all connected underground in a massive, deeply rooted system that goes back to one source. They come together and they're rooted together. This one tree has been able to live for thousands of years and has withstood the test of time because it is deeply rooted and connected, because of its deep roots and its connectivity. Because if one tree bark goes down, one stem falls, it raises up another. Today, it's not necessarily about we want to do something just radically different. Where we've been has gotten us to this point, and it's been good. But as we look to the future, and we look to what it means to be the church in Valparaiso, as Christ calls himself to be the light, we can no longer go about the work of the kingdom as business as usual. We can no longer go about the kingdom doing in survival mode. We need people to step up and to lead. We need folks to decide that I'm going to go out on a limb and risk and evangelize my neighbors, my friends, and my family. That I'm committed to going deeper in this deep-rooted connectivity. That the light that is revealing and makes things visible and creates urgency and creates mobilization in our lives will be that changes our very community in which we live in. So the next 3 weeks, we're going to take more time and we're going to break out what L-E&D really mean. And so we challenge you to be with us because we believe we're at a crossroads in our church history. A crossroads in a moment where we can impact and change the very kingdom in which we serve. I'm going to ask you to stand with me. We're going to sing a song that Chris had started, that new song, and sing in the chorus that we come in this together.